All right, welcome back, group. Hope you all have had a wonderful break and are refreshed and recharged to close to the finish line. We talked about a lot of things to lead us to this point in terms of the methodology of social research, the purpose of social research, um, and how to tie this all together. But one of the challenges, and this is a challenge for anybody that's done social research, is actually reading and writing social research. How to take all these wonderful ideas you've had and all this, the bevy of information that you've gathered, and how to tie that into something coherent that communicates the things that you want it to. So, in chapter 15, we begin to explore this. So the first things you want to begin to do is organize a review of the literature. And again, listen up closely. The major project in here, again, no matter where your grade is at, um, a lot of points still on the line, and it's 30 big points with that final paper. So you can either bolster your grade tremendously with the final paper, or you can mess up a good thing if you don't perform as well. So as always, again, you get much assistance with that every step of the way. We will, transition back into some individualized meetings once we get into heavy duty writing and presentation time. But follow me in this chapter to get a sense of the steps and components that you want to include in your paper. So first off, you want to focus in on organizing a review of the literature. And we'll talk about that in great detail. So everybody's done an annotated bibliography, and you've gotten sources that speak to your particular research question and gives data that either supports or rejects your hypothesis. You want to organize all of that literature and just pretty much be able to speak to how they contribute to your project specifically. It's the most challenging aspect of the final paper, and one that, again, you get a lot of direct guidance for. But definitely, if you haven't already started looking at this chapter, please make sure that you take some time to do so, because I think it can be really helpful. So in this, right, again, in doing your searches, of course, you want to identify keywords. So for example, if you were interested in criminal behavior among female college students, think about, some of the keywords that you might want to put in there. We start with just criminal behavior amongst female college students. You might say college females and crime, criminal activity and college females. Again, you got to make sure that you keep putting college in there. If you just put females, obviously that changes the scope of what you're going to find a great deal. And that's why even in the sources you've gathered already, as you continue to gather sources, it can be really helpful to work with the library stuff in this regard to get a good grasp on some of the sources and how you might approach them. Another important consideration is whether or not you use journals or books. Notice there we're not saying, YouTube links or, Google searches. You can use some of that, and the chapter does address that. But for the most part, again, keep in mind, right, this is, we're doing scientific research here. And in scientific research, you want to be able to use, real objective scientific data. And most of the information is going to be provided on the internet. That's not what they're looking to do. You can find a lot of good information on the internet. That doesn't mean that, again, you can't utilize that. But for the reasons that we talked about in the earlier chapters, academic research is going to be a bit more effective. In going through this process, whether it be a journal or a book, well, in a journal, you want to look at the abstract first, again, as we talked about. The abstract is a summary of the research. It's going to tell you what's the purpose of the research. That purpose of the research will let you know if this is something that's relevant to your topic or not. The abstract will tell you the methods that the author used and a summary of their major findings. This is what I'm looking for. This is the method I use to try and find that, to answer this question. Here's what I found. Following that, you may skim the article. Noting section headings and tables and graphs, particularly that give you certain quantitative data. Again, as we talked about, the data is going to be what supports or rejects your hypothesis. So you skim the article to see if you get a little bit more detail there. And if you see that there's enough information that's relevant and valuable for you, at that point you can read the article. And it's really important, again, as you take these steps, because a lot of the sources that you're going to look at early are not really going to be, may not be relevant to what you're trying to find out. So you don't want to waste time reading a whole article that doesn't have anything to do with what you want to look at. Again, same thing with similar process with a book, where you read the preface or the introduction. The preface. So a lot of times you may see, like, on the inside cover of a book, it gives you a breakdown. Sometimes it may be on the back cover. But whatever the case, they can also give you a sense of if the information is going to be relevant and if you need to proceed and read and get any more information and data from that book. Again, particularly when you go to grad school, you're going to have to follow a lot of these steps. So I really highly encourage you to be attentive to them here. And evaluating these research reports, you want to look at, again, their theoretical orientations. We talked about, again, a theory attempts to explain cause and effect. The research design, again, involves being able to describe both the method and who they're including in their sample, what measurements they're using. Some of these scholars, again, will use samples. Others might utilize experiments. Some may use surveys, and you want to make mindful of the specific questions that they ask, where that's available, and whether or not they did field research. And again, if there is any questions about any of this, let me know. And as always, this lecture is going to be recorded and posted. This is one that I definitely encourage you to look at again. And as you're writing your papers, listen to me, y'all. As you're writing your papers, go through and see the extent that you're going through these various steps, that your literature, that you're doing the proper steps of a literature review, and that you address that within your paper itself. Other things to consider? No worries. Thank you for letting me know. So one of the things, again, you want to look at, right, is like, so there can be content analysis where maybe it wants to look at racial bias in a newspaper. So you might analyze the content of the newspaper to see, to code and see the extent of these biases, there's a pattern of bias there. You also, again, are encouraged in these articles to analyze existing statistics. Again, as you make comparisons in your research, you want to look at the statistics and data that's already been out there, whether it be related to the statistics of depression of various states during COVID, or depression during other, major historical events, whether it be statistics on the educational achievement between single parent and male-centered households. Look at the numbers there and see how those numbers reject or support your hypothesis. That's the main thing that you're doing there. Again, none of this stuff is like, just easy. So these are steps that as you're going through this, I'm going to schedule some time with you all for sure to go over some of the steps in the paper. But I would highly encourage you to schedule some time proactively with me as well. And also schedule some time with the library folks to get some help on some of this stuff, and the Writing Center,
Dr. Muhammad.
Yes, ma'am.
Even like how you just stated, like we're verifying whether it rejects or support. I mean, of course, I know we have to include the ones that support it, but can we include the one that rejects it just to show, like, I'm trying to think of the word, but can we include it?
Great question. Not only can you include it, Janaya, you should and must include it. Because again, our goal here is not to prove our hypothesis right. That's not the goal. Mm-hmm. The goal is to show what the results are. If it shows that income ain't got nothing to do with depression, that's okay. Because you're probably going to find something that's valuable in the research. Maybe it might not be an income level of 30,000. Maybe it might be what you might find actually might be is income like of 80,000 and less. And that might be even more important. Like it's like, damn, it's like this many people are affected. So a lot of times you find a lot of really good information or good scientific conclusions when it's not necessarily what you're looking for. But that's a great question. So yes, you should not only include the data that supports, because in fact, Janaya, that's the problem with information on YouTube and Google and stuff like that. That people only use the information that supports the things that they're trying to like convince you of. That ain't what we're trying to do in science. We're trying to present the information. You be your own judge. So if I'm making a statement about, that it's Women's History Month and a lot of ignorant things have been posted on social media and stuff like, when is Men's History Month and all that? And it's like, look, women are at a economic, political, structural disadvantage in this country and are biased and discriminated against. I ain't saying that because, again, I want it to be true. I'm saying it because that's what the objective facts have shown. You may have biases that want to ignore the fact that Black people are killed at higher rates by the police, but that's what the data shows. So in science, our goal is to, again, just present the data. Please keep that in mind. Please keep that in mind. You ain't just trying to show that, hey, I'm right. That's not. So it's okay to be wrong. Because in fact, our goal in science should not be first, and keep this in mind as you do your literature reviews. Your goal is really not to find data and information that supports what you believe. Your goal is actually to first seek out information that rejects what you believe. And then your conclusion is whatever the rational explanations are remaining. And that's totally okay. There are some useful internet websites. Don't get me wrong. Like the internet can be very valuable. I am really grateful to it as a researcher to have the internet as a tool. But you got to be very careful and mindful about the things you're searching for. Particularly, again, a lot of search engines is not necessarily giving you the best and most accurate information. It may give you the most searched information or just the information that they feel is most relevant. So again, you want to really be very critical in how you go about using the internet to get information. And that's true of almost any topic. So again, something like this here, right? Infant mortality rate, the Henry J. Kaiser Family Foundation, where again, if there are organizations where their whole purpose is to look at things like infant mortality, they probably have done a little bit more research than the people that's saying that that Democrats and Hollywood people are secretly killing babies and working as pedophiles and stuff like that. Maybe they are, who knows? I don't study that kind of thing. But they need to have a lot more evidence here because with social research, we want to look at, again, what are the objective findings? We should be able to see how they came to their conclusions. That's what you want to make clear in your research as well. So there are some basic rules and policies in using the internet. As always, again, we don't have a final exam in here, but we will have a second quiz that will be coming up shortly, a pop quiz. So this is definitely something that you may see on the quiz in terms of the basic steps that you want to utilize in evaluating internet research or internet materials. So study these closely, but don't just study them for a quiz. Keep this in mind, again, as you seek out information, not just for this class, but just in general. Now, I'll elaborate further in a moment. One of the things you have to do in your annotated bibliography is speak to the background of the author. That matters. If the author of, again, like you're looking at information on the research of Black families, and the author is like, some leading, Trump supporter or somebody in the Klan. Because again, there are people that have agendas on the internet and will present information to support those agendas. So you want to look closely at, does this person have an agenda? Or is this somebody that just writes about this topic? And to be clear, let me be very clear. Everybody has biases. Everybody got an agenda. Like, it's hard to be a human and not be. So it's not that social scientists don't have biases and that sometimes those biases don't show up. It just, the difference with social science, this the main difference, is you get to see how they got their information and how they made their conclusions. So science demands that, again, much like in your math class, right? Where it's not just enough for you to come up with the right answer. You would have to, quote unquote, show your work. So in social science and in science in general, it just means that we show our work. When people, again, like if you don't want to take the COVID vaccine and there's still, again, information that I need to get about it, that's totally fine. But you should also know that the information in terms of how the vaccine was created and some of the different shortcomings and potential side effects, like virtually all of that information is public. You can go find every bit of that information if you want to. Before they introduced it to the public, they had a hearing that lasted 8 hours. This is on TV, on YouTube. And there were people whose job it is to be skeptical, asking them all types of questions. Well, what about this? What about this? The questions that you all probably have, that we all probably have. There are people who've asked those questions on the public record, and we can see their responses. We can go and look at their reports. We can look at their data. That's very different than a lot of information you get on the internet. You want to look if they're advocating a particular point of view. Again, do they give accurate and complete references? This is important. The references allow us to see where you got your information. And this is why you got to critically analyze the information, and you don't want to just be putting stuff into your papers. You don't want to be plagiarizing stuff. You want to be clear on how you're utilizing information. Otherwise, you may use something that does not necessarily support the claims you're trying to make. You also want to look, is the data up to date? Is it official? Is it a university research site? Once, okay, this data is good. One of the things that I use the internet for is that I might get one source through a book or article, and I might look through the internet to see, like, okay, is anybody else saying this? They said that this happened in 510 BCE. But maybe somebody else said it happened in this year. Let me go check it out. Okay, all these sources are saying the same thing. So you can utilize it in that way. Again, be very careful about how to cite the materials. Citations are very important, young people. Like I said, we need to see how and where you got your information. In newspaper articles, they don't have to tell you the source of their information. In fact, if they tell you their sources, they might lose out on a lot of information. But here we are supposed to tell you everywhere we got everything, where you can go, you can look through my research, look through all my sources, how I develop my information, and you can do your own research to see if I'm telling the truth or not. The things you want to consider here, of course, is the web address, the author and title, any publishing information, and ideally, again, there's a lot of information that you get that's posted on the internet. It's also available in print form, and if you can get your access to that as well, that would also be beneficial. So let's look at some general guidelines before we break for the day in writing social research. Like with any good writing, you want to use proper grammar and spelling. Again, that's why I highly encourage you to try and visit the Writing Center over these next few weeks, even if you have to visit them virtually. But get help. It's okay if your grammar and spelling is not where you want it to be. And even if it is, having another set of eyes can be incredibly valuable. There's nothing that I submit that I don't have somebody else look at. And you'll be amazed at the type of, the ways that they can help your research grow. There are different style guides, such as the Element of Style. Used to be a little small paperback book back when I was a student many years ago. They probably got it online now. And you always want to consider your audience, the length, and the aim of the report, So again, at every step of your research, make sure that you keep your research focus in mind. What's your question? What's your hypothesis? I'll let you catch up a bit, and then I'll elaborate on this second slide. Does anybody have any questions or comments so far? Does anybody have any questions or comments so far? All right, fantastic. Let me know if you do, and I'll resume in a moment after I give you all a chance to get this information down. And again, be mindful of this structure. It's really kind of laying out for you all an outline of how you want to construct your papers. You want to begin by laying out the purpose and an overview. So just be to that your purpose is to speak to, the different, the relationship between education and single parent structure, gendered single parent structure. You might give some background about, the amount of single parents in the country, get some data on that, get some background about, any ideas about, the gender differences in family structure. If there was a famous case that kind of highlights this. Then you get right into review of the literature. So again, in the first section, and make sure that you hear me. If you don't got a chance to write this down now, please write this down later. In a purpose and overview section, you're going to restate your research question and your hypothesis. You're going to introduce your methodology, and everybody's method for the most part should be secondary data analysis. And then the literature review in your second section is going to begin to explore how that literature speaks to your research topic. And ultimately, all that literature that you see, like your question is something new and different and unique. So you're going to say, well, hey, this author discussed the relationship between, depression and education level. This during COVID. This author discussed, depression, amongst in a senior citizen home during COVID. This author over here looked at, crime during COVID and test scores during COVID. So I'm showing over here that other behaviors have been affected during this pandemic. So it's reasonable to think that depression might be affected as well. And then you're going to say that in spite of all these dope things that these authors have brought to the table, they don't really speak to the relationship between income and COVID because blah, 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 blah. Again, please go back and look at this. I ask y'all to do this often. I'm not sure how much y'all do, but really be clear on the structure because it's not a complicated structure. It just is time consuming to go and do it and lay it all out. Give me 1 second. I think I got a question or comment in the chat. Yes. Also, again, please make sure you avoid plagiarism. Again, that is an easy way to get a 0 out of 30, like in no word, like not a single line should be plagiarized, right? Arrows, every single word in your own words. Again, it's okay to quote and cite them, although you want to limit that. You don't want a whole paper full of quotations, but just paraphrase what they're saying. More times than not, it's going to be, because again, one of the things we talked about before, right? Oops. Is considering your audience, So with that in mind, you want to be very mindful about, you want the information to be factual and objective, but you don't want it to be overly technical. So you want to write this stuff in an intelligent manner, but in a way where everyday people can understand it. And people that are not experts the way that you will understand it. Be mindful of the study, design, and execution. So again, write in your source, in the bibliographies, well, in the literature review. Speak to the population. The population is speaking to, like, okay, it says 100 single mothers that from a Midwestern city. Is it 5,000 survey respondents from the U.S. Census? What sampling method did they use? Did they use a longitudinal sample? Was it an online survey? What was the sample size? What method did they use to collect the data? Did they say anything about the completion rate if they gave out surveys? And then the most challenging part is analyzing and interpreting all that data. Again, that is not easy. That is not something that you got to do by yourself. A lot of our time when we've had our individual meetings has been focused on this, where we'll look at an abstract together and I just ask you, okay, break this down. What are they saying? And how does what they saying tie back to your research question or hypothesis? And in those conversations, you all have proven to be very successful and really effective at that. So trust yourself through you got to do that 25 times through like 25 abstracts. Trust yourself to do that. And where you fall short, I'll be sure to catch you. You want to look at the summary and conclusions of the article. Again, review the significant findings in the context of the larger project and existing scientific research. So again, it's a delicate dance, and you'll get better with this as you advance as scholars. You want to provide as much data as possible without being cluttered. You want to present quantitative data. Again, that's data with numbers, in a way that the reader can recompute them. Again, it's all about the reader, You got to, as you write, you want to put yourself in the shoes of the reader and see how they're seeing and interpreting this information. Be sure to integrate supporting materials into your writings. Draft the explicit conclusions in the different sources you've had. Write clearly, again, make sure that grammar is tight. Make sure that is coherent enough for somebody that's not an expert in this discipline. And we'll close by saying a review of the literature should not be biased towards a particular point of view. It should not be biased towards a particular point of view. You want to make sure that the research ethics is a fundamental component, again, of social science, meaning that you always want to be clear, and this won't be as much of a problem in you all's cases, but you always want to be clear that you don't do any harm to your research subjects in the course of that process. Does anybody have any questions about anything we went over today?
No.
We'll do a little bit more on Thursday. If you do have any questions, let me know. Be making sure that you check your emails constantly over these next few weeks, as we're going to really work feverishly towards the finish line. And I'm going to need, again, to be meeting with some of you all on an individual basis. And I'm going to need you all, again, to really be responsive towards this. Because as I talked about from the beginning, social research is a collective process. It almost always is. It's very rare that any one individual does everything by themselves. So again, the requirement and expectation here is not that you all do that. So please get and seek out help. Janiyah, hold tight. I know you had a question, and I'll address that very quickly. If nobody else has any questions, I'll see you all Thursday afternoon. What's going on, Ms. Burns?
So I turned in my assignment today for class, but after I had turned it in, I had seen where you had said that we need to include 10 or more methods. But honestly, I felt as if like being that the pandemic had started beforehand, like before we even mentioned about doing research projects and everything, I had only focused on the survey. Of course I know because I wrote it, but as far as like me naming them all, I think I only had like a good 4 or 5, and I wanted to know like would that like harm our grade or anything? Because I mean I did explain and give details of why those are important and why I should use them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the assignment calls for 10. So yeah, that if you don't have 10, it would be challenging to get full credit.
Okay. All right. That's all I was concerned about.
For sure. If you have any other questions, let me know. Continue to work, and I'll give you all feedback on that pretty shortly.
Okay, I'm about to also go ahead and put my classes down on the e-learning.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, you should. You haven't granted clearance. If you do have any problems, let me know as soon as you can.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Janiyah.
Okay, thank you.